My name is Livia Firth, and for years now I've been exploring supply chains around the world, learning from and advocating for the often unseen people behind the clothes we wear every day. Today, the ongoing struggle for workers' rights and wages has become more urgent than ever. As the COVID-19 pandemic has made its way around the world, millions of garment workers have lost their jobs without warning. Stories of this enormous toll have made headlines, and what is starting to emerge more and more is the even larger system of greed and exploitation. I wanted to speak with the workers, the experts, and the activists who have been working on the front lines for decades to help better understand where we are right now and what it means to live up to the human right to a living wage. Tulsi, so nice to see you. You have been on the ground fighting against corporate greed and exploitation for so many years. So you are the perfect person to describe what has been happening.
You know, I've been thinking a lot lately about what is it that defines the fashion industry? How can we describe it in a nutshell? And for me, it's been the great promise of bringing women out of poverty, of being able to create a level of equality. But what it's really led to is the biggest inequality that we've seen. We've got 60 to 80 million women who are not earning enough to live on.
What has happened in the last few months, last 12, 14 months because of COVID?
You know, they were already facing destitution. 70% of workers were facing hunger, which is really hard to fathom. Most workers said that they were more scared of starving than they were of COVID. And they were scared of COVID. And I think that really shows to you the level of stress that was putting on workers, because as the stores started to close across the developed world, that had an instantaneous knock-on effect with workers. Suddenly, they were destitute. They never earned enough to live on to be able to ensure that they had any kind of economic buffer. So they were essentially left out in the cold.
Hạt ấy ban thử bà bò, nó bây giờ cho Covid máu rung chặt thử ban bật tiết ở miền ca nghiệt phương ở miền ca cầm mong tính, chẳng bây giờ bật rung chặt, dương cặp bông tay chỉ bẹ cây xẹp phong, dương cặp bông tay chầm nâu tịch phong, hai tay chầm nai tràn. ผมឲ្យសម្រាប់ហានិភ័យរបស់ខ្ញុំនៅធ្វើការស៊ីថ្ងៃរងថ្ងៃគឺទៅទាំងការភ័យខ្លាចចាសាអីគឺយើងខ្ញុំត្រូវការលុយដើម្បីយកមកផ្គត់ផ្គង់គ្រួសារដើម្បីយកមកទិញកទិញហូបសម្រាប់ចិញ្ចឹមកូនរបស់ខ្ញុំก็ทำงานเยอะเวลางานเยอะเราก็จะไม่มีเวลากินข้าวส่งต่อเวลาเพราะว่าเราต้องเร่งงานนะคะเพื่อที่จะได้ให้มันเสร็จเร็วเราก็ได้รับค่าตอบแทนอยู่ก็พอดีแหละค่ะพอดีเป๊ะเลยก็เพียงพอก็คือแบบพอดีค่าใช้จ่ายทั้งหมดก็คือพอดีก็ไม่เหลือเก็บ
Brands today often pay less for products made than they did a decade ago. And as clothing consumption and production speeds up, followed by rising costs of living, wages in garment-producing countries today remain shockingly low.
তাহলে হচ্ছে সব জিনিসের দাম বৃদ্ধি, তাহলে আমাদের কেন দাম বাড়বে না? দেখা উচিত, তাহলে সে বুঝতে পারবে যে জিনিসটা কোথা থেকে আসছে এবং শ্রমিকের কত কষ্ট হয়েছে ওই জিনিসটা তৈরি করতে। খাওয়া নাই, দাওয়া নাই, সে হচ্ছে ওইটার পিছনে শ্রম দিতেছে। না, সেটা দিয়ে কখনোই আমার জীবন চলে না, কারণ একটা সংসারে অনেক টাকা খরচ হয়। আগে যেই চালের বস্তা আমরা কিনছি হচ্ছে আপনার 1700-1800 টাকা দিয়ে, এখন সেই চালের বস্তায় কিনতে হয় 3000 টাকা দিয়ে। তাহলে কিভাবে আমরা চলবো? আমাদের বেতন তো ওই তুলনায় বাড়ে নাই। তো আমরাও তো একটা মানুষ, তারপরেও শ্রম দেই কেন? পেটের দায়। আসলে বর্তমানে আমাদের যেই বেতন, কারণ আমরা কিন্তু হচ্ছে কাজ করছি, দিন রাত কাজ করছি আমরা, এমনও দিন গেছে আগে চেয়ে এখন আমাদের বেশি প্রেশার যাইতেছে। কিন্তু সেই ক্ষেত্রে কিন্তু আমরা কোনোই বেনিফিট পাচ্ছি না, কারণ হচ্ছে আমাদের কাজ বেশি করতেছি, টাকা কম।
We never ever found a living wage in garment producing countries. It was generally between 40 and 50% of what was needed for a basic, decent life.
So first of all, what is a living wage? Because there is a minimum wage and then there is a living wage.
So a minimum wage should not be less than a living wage for obvious reasons, because a living wage is the wage necessary to sustain a basic, decent life.
I started working for this industry when I was 12 years old. I went to the factory with my 10 years old brother. And that was not my choice that, oh, just leave the factory and go to the, just leave the school and go to the factory. I had to go because my father was the primary earner and he got ill, so there is no one who can bring food in the table for 7.
From a child laborer to a fierce and effective voice fighting for the rights of garment workers, Kalpona now leads the Bangladesh Center for Workers' Solidarity based in Dhaka.
If my mom would get a living wage, I would be not ending up a child labor in the factory. So I'll be making $6 a month, working over 400 hours. So that is my life. I need to be stood up in 16 or 18 hours in my feet because I was helper, so there was no sitting. Slapped by the supervisor, kicked by them. So our factory was like towards the end of Dhaka, like in Uttora in those days. And folks came in the town. So they were educating workers about their law and rights, and also, helping them to sue the factory owner when they illegally fired. I came to that level of training. It was 4 hours long, which has completely changed my life. I consider it a second born for me. And I learned that I'm supposed to work 8 hours. My overtime should be double than general hour. I'm supposed to not slap in the factory floor. They cannot bully me in the factory. And something beautiful I learned, that I have right to organize and I have right to bargain. There is no cheap clothes. There is nothing cheap. Someone always needs to pay for that. And who is it? That is worker.
Workers aren't accidentally in poverty. Workers are in poverty because the system was created to keep them in poverty. It didn't just put them in poverty and leave them there. They're sustaining a growing workforce of people in poverty because that's the intention of it. And there is nothing that exists at this point to say to brands, you have to lift the wage. And for too long, particularly with a living wage, brands haven't been willing to accept that it is indeed a fundamental human right.
And also you talked about normalizing the fact that they live in poverty, but in a way the brands managed to normalize the conversation around how difficult it is to pay a living wage. I've been to so many conferences and panels where the brands, represented from every single fast fashion brand would say, but we really want to, and we're committing to, but you spoke about a commitment to try and promise a basic living wage. What does that mean? How do you define a fair living wage in Bangladesh? What does that mean? And I have a pilot project in 3 factories, and by 2018, 15% of your factories are going to have that. It's not good enough. It's not.
It's very clear for us that what a living wage is something that the workers should say, and that's incorporated in our way of working.
How much is it?
And that's not for us to say a sum, but we do an assessment all the time.
How much is it?
To make sure that it covers the basic needs of the workers.
Thousands of pages have been written and conferences held arguing about, is it $1 or $1.50 for this country? And what struck me was that was, in a way, just an excuse for not dealing with the problem. So what I wanted to do was take the discussion away from the question of what is the monetary value of a living wage onto how do we ensure that there is a living wage. We looked at the European Union's legislation that applied outside of the European Union. And we found various areas where the European Union had legislated with effect outside its borders, but where there was nothing were rules about how people should be treated in relation to products that we consume. So the EU could legislate for monetary issues, but not for people issues. There has to be legal rules that cover this area. You can't deal with all these issues by way of voluntary agreements.
What began as curiosity has led to a new legal framework for holding European-based brands accountable for wages paid during production and enforced at the point of import, where violators could face steep fines and legal consequences to avoiding responsibility for the workers on which they continue to build their profits. This soon-to-be proposed legislation to the EU could become a game changer for workers and could set up a powerful new precedent for what's possible around the world. What would you like women who buy clothes on the high street in London, in Rome, in New York, in Madrid, in Paris to know?
We all need these jobs, but we want them with dignity. A dignity doesn't come until we have a living wage. We need a dignified job. It is that simple.
As a lawyer, I know that people can argue anything. It's always possible to make an argument, and it's even possible to believe your own argument. But fundamentally, if you actually have to face the human being who is living in endless poverty, in relentless poverty, in poverty that will not end, I would say to those CEOs, make that argument to that worker, to their face. Make that argument to the person who is suffering.
There is power in us together. There's power in the collective. And workers know that all the time. You know, when workers are fighting for better conditions in a factory, they're not doing it as individuals. They're doing it together. They're doing it together as a collective, you know, because that's what expressing solidarity means. It means your struggle is my struggle. Enough is enough. The destitution of garment workers, no one is okay with that. And brands need to wake up and realize no one is okay validating your profits anymore. We don't feel comfortable with it, and you're gonna have to change it. It feels like the clock is ticking.
A new chapter is beginning. I can feel it. A deep knowing that the time for awareness has passed, and that the great opportunity before us now is for true transformation. As we join the fight, fueled by workers everywhere, relentless in the belief that a human life is worth far more than the unpaid cost of cheap clothes.